You can't even imagine how many tears women cried in the late Victorian era. We are accustomed to admiring the glamour of that era, but we rarely think about the icy silence that reigned where the balls ended and private life began. Behind the marble and gilded facades lay destinies bound by rules of etiquette stronger than the steel bars of a cage. Women whose portraits still adorn museums were often nothing more than living dolls in the theater of someone else's vanity. Their bedrooms, these abodes of sleep, were in fact witnesses to the deepest loneliness and silent cries of the soul. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how luxurious interiors became accomplices to personal tragedies, and why the most beautiful room in the house was often the most frightening place for its mistress. What if I told you that everything you believed about the idleness of wealthy ladies is not true? Every morning for a Victorian lady did not begin with bliss, but with the hard, exhausting work of creating her own image. As soon as she opened her eyes, a woman fell into the hands of maids who began the process of transforming a living person into a flawless statue. This was not self-care as we understand it, but the fulfillment of a harsh duty to society and her husband. No one asked how she felt or what her soul desired at that early hour. The cold water in the earthenware basin was supposed to invigorate the body, but often only served as a reminder of the cold that reigned in this huge house. The cosmetic procedures of the time were not so much pleasant as dangerous and tedious. Lead white was rubbed into the skin to achieve the aristocratic pallor that was considered the standard. Poisonous substances slowly penetrated the body, poisoning it day after day in order to conform to the ideal. A woman looked in the mirror and saw not herself, but a canvas on which to paint a mask of well-being. Hair, a symbol of female strength and beauty, became a heavy burden in the literal sense of the word. Complex hairstyles required the use of hairpieces, hot tongs, and numerous pins digging into the head. Then came the underwear, the number of layers of which is beyond modern comprehension. Thin shirts, pantaloons, petticoats, all this created a cocoon that hid the body from prying eyes and even from its owner. Every detail of the wardrobe was designed to correct the figure, to fit it to the fashionable silhouette. It was a daily reminder that naturalness was a flaw that had to be carefully hidden. A woman's body did not belong to her. It was the property of her family's status. Dresses made of heavy velvet or brocade, embroidered with beads, weighed kilograms. This burden fell on the shoulders of a fragile woman, bending her to the ground, but she was obliged to keep her back straight. The luxury of the fabric contrasted with the lack of freedom of movement that this fabric dictated. Each step was accompanied by the rustling of skirts, announcing the approach of the mistress, depriving her of the opportunity to pass unnoticed. She was a monument to her husband's wealth, on display for all to see. Having finished dressing, the woman saw the reflection of a perfect lady of society, but often did not recognize herself in it. Her living soul was hidden deep inside this shell of silk and whalebone. She left the bedroom ready to play her role, smile, and engage in small talk. But behind the closed door remained her true self, suppressed and forgotten until evening. Only when she returned to her bedroom late at night could she begin the reverse process of liberation. Removing layer after layer, she regained the right to breathe deeply, but the morning ritual inevitably repeated itself over and over, day after day, year after year. The bedroom remembered those moments of quiet hatred for her own reflection. I wonder how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world, because beauty standards have always been cruel everywhere. Where are you watching us from? Write in the comments whether you think modern fashion has become completely free from dictates. Are you ready to learn the truth about why spouses in wealthy homes slept separately? We often see romantic scenes in movies with couples sharing one large bed, but the reality of the Gilded Age was quite different. Having separate bedrooms for husband and wife was considered a sign of high status and aristocracy. This was explained by considerations of hygiene, comfort, and propriety. However, behind this tradition lay a deep emotional gulf between spouses. The male and female halves of the house were often connected by only one door, which could be locked from either side. This door became a symbol of a boundary that could not be crossed without an invitation or a special reason. The woman remained the sole mistress of her own chambers, but it was a lonely kingdom. The husband appeared there as a guest, a visitor whose presence required preparation and tension. Spontaneity of feelings and simple human warmth were banished from married life by etiquette. The interiors of women's bedrooms were deliberately designed to be delicate, airy, and filled with pastel tones. This was intended to emphasize the fragility and purity of their inhabitants. But this marshmallow luxury often lacked life and masculine energy. Women fell asleep and woke up alone, surrounded by lace and silk, but without a reliable shoulder nearby. Their nights were filled with silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Separate sleeping arrangements were also dictated by the medical views of the time. It was believed that sleeping together in the same bed was harmful to health, as people inhaled each other's used air. Doctors recommended distance in order to preserve the freshness of the complexion and the calmness of the nervous system. The science of the time often served the ideas of alienation, giving them the weight of authoritative opinion. Thus, coldness in relationships was given a medical justification. Of course, there were happy exceptions where the doors between bedrooms were never locked. But the social morality of the time condemned excessive affection and displays of passion, even in marriage. Restraint was considered a virtue, and emotional coldness a sign of good breeding. Women learned to suppress their impulses, hiding them deep inside. The walls of the bedroom absorbed not only the scent of perfume, but also heavy sighs of disappointment. Luxurious furniture witnessed the fading of hopes for happiness, giving way to habit. Young girls who dreamed of love turned into reserved matrons who knew the value of silence. Their bedrooms became golden cages where there was everything except love. Isolation in their own bedrooms sometimes led to the development of nervous disorders. Women began to hear rustles, see shadows, and their imaginations painted frightening pictures. The lack of live communication and tactile contact had a devastating effect on the psyche. The silence of the huge house weighed on the ears, driving them mad. But even in this isolation, there were secret corners that no one knew about. Want to learn a secret that will change your perception of Victorian furniture? Read on to the next chapter to find out what the ladies hid in their secretaries. I discovered this by accident while studying antique catalogs from that era, and it struck me to the core. Every woman's bedroom had an elegant desk or secretary desk. This piece of furniture was not just a fashion statement, but perhaps a woman's only true friend. Only on paper could she confide the thoughts and feelings that were forbidden in polite society. These tables were masterpieces of furniture art, inlaid with mother-of-pearl and precious woods. But their main value lay in their system of secret drawers and double bottoms. Craftsmen deliberately created hiding places, knowing that every housewife had secrets to hide. Not only bills and guest lists were kept there, but also the most intimate relics. The diaries of Victorian women are a chronicle of quiet despair and hidden rebellion. On their pages, well-bred ladies turned into suffering, hateful, and passionately desiring living people. The ink absorbed tears of resentment towards their husbands, fear of childbirth, and longing for freedom. The handwriting, sometimes smooth, sometimes jumbled, betrayed the storm of emotions raging in their souls. Writing letters was one of the few permitted forms of entertainment and communication. But even in correspondence with friends or sisters, caution and allegory had to be exercised. Therefore, the most important words often remained unwritten or were destroyed immediately after being read. The secretary saw a trembling hand bring a match to the corner of the paper. The ashes of other people's secrets settled in the bedroom fireplace. Sometimes women wrote poems or stories, trying to unleash their creative potential. But in a world where a woman's destiny was the family, these talents rarely found an outlet. Manuscripts were hidden in the farthest drawers, becoming silent witnesses to unrealized ambitions. Talent withered within four walls, unable to blossom. It was here that a woman could be herself, even if only for a few minutes a day. The scratch of a pen on paper was the only sound breaking the night's silence. These desks absorbed so much female energy, so much pain and hope, that it seems they still retain the warmth of their hands. Antique dealers still find forgotten letters and diaries in old desks. These discoveries reveal to us the truth about a life that was hidden behind a facade. Like this, if you are moved by this theme of preserving memories and personal secrets. Guess how long it took to turn a healthy woman into a fragile flower? The bedroom interior always featured a couch, sofa, or, as it was called, a chaise longue. This elegant piece of furniture became a symbol of female weakness and frailty of that era. But women did not lie on them out of laziness, but out of complete physical and moral exhaustion. The fashion and medicine of the time dictated that the ideal woman was an ephemeral creature, devoid of brute physical strength. Pallor, languor, and a tendency to faint were considered signs of aristocracy and a delicate constitution. Women were led to believe that they were naturally weak and in need of constant rest, and the couch became the place where they spent a significant part of their lives. We should not forget the purely physiological reasons for such weakness. A tightly laced corset compressed the lungs, making it impossible to take a deep breath. The slightest excitement, stuffiness, or brisk walking led to dizziness. A woman was simply forced to lie down to catch her breath and avoid fainting. Women spent hours on these couches recovering from difficult childbirths, which followed one after another. Medicine was underdeveloped, and many women's ailments were not treated, but simply left to rest. Doctors prescribed complete rest as a universal remedy for all diseases. Women found themselves confined to their bedrooms, becoming hostages to their own bodies. There was even a popular diagnosis of hysteria, which was used to explain any manifestation of female discontent or emotionality. Treatment often consisted of isolation in the bedroom, darkened windows, and prolonged rest on a couch. Women were literally forced to be sick, suppressing their will and activity. It was a convenient way to control unwelcome wives and daughters. Sometimes on this couch, a woman would simply cry, burying her face in a pillow so that no one could hear her. Tears of despair, helplessness, and resentment were absorbed by the expensive upholstery. It was a place where she could momentarily drop her mask of well-being, but then she had to get up, wash her face, and go back to doing her duty. Thus, this beautiful piece of furniture was a real instrument of oppression. It taught women to be passive and to think of themselves as inferior. In the next chapter, you will learn why even something as simple as clothing became a real prison. The process of getting dressed was not just a routine, but a complex logistical operation that took time and energy. A woman of the age of splendor could not get dressed on her own. Without the help of a maid, it was physically impossible. The fastenings were at the back, the lacing required effort, and the number of layers was confusing. This dependence on servants deprived women of even the slightest privacy and independence. Wardrobes were crammed with dresses, each of which was intended for a specific occasion. A morning gown, a walking gown, a visiting gown, a tea gown, a dinner gown, a ball gown. A mistake in choosing an outfit could cost a woman her reputation. Women had to constantly remember the complex dress code, living in fear of making a mistake. A full set of clothes could weigh up to 15-20 kilograms. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack from morning to night, but still having to move gracefully and dance. The fabrics were dense, often with metal threads, decorated with heavy stones and embroidery. It was luxurious armor that protected from the outside world, but also weighed heavily. The hems of long skirts collected dust and dirt from the streets, despite all the tricks. Women brought street dirt into the house on their luxurious clothes, symbolizing the impossibility of staying clean in this world. Cleaning dresses was a separate, laborious task for the servants. Complex fabrics could not simply be washed. They had to be cleaned with brushes and chemicals. It was hot inside the dress in summer and cold in winter. The deep necklines of evening dresses exposed the chest and shoulders to drafts, while the lower body overheated under layers of skirts. Thermoregulation was disrupted, leading to frequent colds and inflammation. Beauty required sacrifice, and that sacrifice was health. Shoes were also an instrument of torture. Narrow, high-heeled shoes deformed the foot, making long walks impossible. Women were restricted in their movements and could only take small steps. This emphasized their dependence on men, who had to lend a hand and support them. Changing clothes took place several times a day, turning life into an endless conveyor belt of outfit changes. This killed time, leaving no opportunity to do anything serious or useful. Life turned into serving one's own wardrobe. Women became appendages to their dresses. Looking at the empty mannequins in fashion museums, we admire the skill of the tailors. But we forget that inside these masterpieces beat living hearts, suffering from stuffiness and heaviness. The dressing room was a battlefield where women lost to their own status every day. What if everything you were taught about the benefits of sunlight was strictly forbidden in a Victorian bedroom? The windows in bedrooms of that era were always tightly draped. Heavy velvet, thick silk, and several layers of tulle created a reliable barrier to daylight and fresh air. The rooms were perpetually dim, creating an atmosphere of mystery, but also of mustiness. The fear of sunlight was an obsession of the aristocracy. The sun was the enemy of white skin, as it could cause freckles or a tan, which was unacceptable. In addition, bright light could damage expensive furniture, upholstery, and fade wallpaper. Therefore, life was lived in twilight by candlelight or dim gas lamps. This artificial twilight affected the mood and psyche of the bedroom's inhabitants. The lack of sunlight led to vitamin D deficiency, which exacerbated physical weakness and depression. The room smelled of dust, perfume, and medicine, and the air was stuffy and heavy. Ventilation was considered dangerous because of drafts and harmful miasmas from the street. Heavy curtains also served as sound insulation. They blocked out the sounds of the street, creating the illusion of complete isolation from the outside world. The silence in the bedroom was oppressive and stifling. The woman felt as if she were buried alive in this velvet tomb. Dust accumulated in the folds of fabric, in carpets and canopies. Victorian interiors were overloaded with textiles that were impossible to clean perfectly. This provoked allergies and lung diseases. Women literally breathed in centuries of dust, suffocating in their own luxury. In the twilight, objects cast bizarre shadows, frightening impressionable ladies. The outlines of furniture were distorted, turning into monsters. Fear of the dark haunted many adult women who had grown up in an atmosphere of Gothic novels and superstitions. Curtains were a symbol of the boundary between private and public life, but this boundary was so dense that it did not allow life to enter. Drawn curtains meant that the mistress of the house was not receiving visitors, that she was not in the mood. It was a signal of withdrawal from the world. Sometimes a woman's only desire was to throw open those curtains and let in the bright, lively sun. But etiquette and habit were stronger. She remained sitting in the semi-darkness, guarding her pale complexion and her melancholy. How did they cope with the endless waiting in those dark rooms? We will talk about this in the next chapter. Evening in a Victorian home was a time of particular tension. A woman, already dressed for dinner, would often sit in her bedroom or boudoir, waiting for her husband to return from the club or business meetings. These hours of waiting seemed to drag on forever, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. She listened to every clatter of wheels on the cobblestones, wondering if it was him. Men of that time led active social lives outside the home. Clubs, politics, business, meetings with friends, all this was their world. Women, on the other hand, were assigned the role of guardians of the hearth, who always had to be at home. Their lives were static, while men's lives were full of movement. This inequality of rhythms created a gap in their understanding of each other. Waiting was not passive, but active. It was necessary to check that everything was ready for his arrival. Were the slippers warm? Was dinner served? Did the children look perfect? Women were managers of their husband's comfort. Any mistake made by the servants could cause dissatisfaction on the part of the husband, and the wife was always to blame. Often, husbands returned late and in a bad mood. The smell of alcohol and tobacco that they brought with them invaded the women's space. A woman had to be ready to listen, calm him down, or conversely, disappear if her husband wanted to be alone. Her own feelings and fatigue were not taken into account. The children, if there were any, were already asleep in the nursery under the supervision of nannies. A woman of high society was not supposed to spend too much time with them. Even motherhood was regulated and limited. She was lonely even in her own house, full of people. Waiting for her husband was a form of service. It was a reminder of who was in charge in the house and around whom the whole world revolved. A woman was a companion revolving around the planet man. Her orbit was strictly defined and unchanging. When footsteps finally sounded on the stairs, her heart sank not with joy, but with tension. What kind of mood would he be in? What could she expect from this evening? The bedroom fell silent in anticipation of the outcome of another day. On every lady's dressing table stood a jewelry box. It was a source of pride, a symbol of the family's wealth, and at the same time, a heavy chain binding a woman to her position. The diamonds, rubies, and pearls did not belong to her personally. Legally, they were her husband's property, part of the family capital that she only wore temporarily. In the event of financial collapse, the jewelry was sold first. A woman knew that her beloved necklace was just an insurance fund for a rainy day. This deprived the jewelry of the sacred meaning of a gift. They were an investment, and the woman was a showcase for displaying them. Heavy earrings pulled on the earlobes, and massive bracelets rubbed the wrists. Wearing them was physically difficult, but necessary. Nobility obliges. This phrase justified any inconvenience. The sparkle of the stones was supposed to dazzle those around her, hiding the paleness and fatigue of the owner. There was a strict etiquette for wearing jewelry. Young girls were allowed to wear pearls and turquoise, married ladies, diamonds and sapphires. Widows wore jet and onyx. The stones marked a woman's age and social status, like tags. It was not possible to wear what one simply liked. One had to wear what was appropriate. Jewelry was often passed down from generation to generation. When a woman put on an antique tiara, she felt the weight of the expectations of all its previous owners. She became a link in a chain, obliged to bear an heir in order to pass these stones on. She was merely a custodian, not the owner. Gifts in the form of jewelry were often a way to buy forgiveness. A husband would give a bracelet after a quarrel or infidelity, trying to atone for his guilt. The woman would accept this gift with a cold smile, knowing the true price of this glitter. Each stone in the necklace could remind her of a specific offense or humiliation. Selling jewelry secretly from one's husband was a common theme in novels of the time, and it had a basis in reality. Women tried to get at least a little cash to help poor relatives or cover card debts. It was a huge risk, threatening scandal and expulsion. A jewelry box was a beautiful coffin for a woman's freedom. When the lid closed, the stones were plunged into darkness, just like the dreams of their owner. The sparkle was only for the public. In the bedroom, only the weight of the metal remained. A Victorian lady's bedroom was never completely deserted. Servants were always invisibly present. The maids who made the bed, lit the fireplace, and laid out clothes knew more about their mistress's life than her own husband. This constant surveillance deprived women of any sense of privacy, even in the most intimate moments. The servants were shadows gliding through the house. They were supposed to be invisible, but they had eyes and ears. Stains on the sheets, tear-stained handkerchiefs, empty medicine bottles. All these were clues that the servants used to read the story of the marriage. The woman knew that she was being discussed in the kitchen, that her secrets were becoming the subject of gossip. Her relationship with her personal maid was complicated. On the one hand, she was the closest woman in her circle who saw her mistress without embellishment. On the other hand, the social gap between them was insurmountable. Trust often bordered on the danger of blackmail. The maid could become either a loyal ally or a bitter enemy. The servants entered the bedroom early in the morning, while the mistress was still asleep, to light the fire. The sound of the poker against the fireplace grate was the first sound of the day. A stranger in the room at the moment of awakening was a violation of boundaries that had become the norm. A woman could not simply lie in bed. She had to immediately conform to her status in front of the servant. Conversations in front of servants were conducted in a special coded language or were interrupted when they appeared. This created an atmosphere of tension and understatement. It was impossible to relax, swear, or cry without fear that it would become public knowledge. Servants were also a tool of control for husbands. Through the housekeeper or butler, he could monitor his wife's expenses, correspondence, and visits. In her own home, a woman was under the supervision of her husband. The silence of the bedroom was deceptive. Someone could always be standing outside the door in the hallway. The rustle of skirts, the creak of floorboards, muffled whispers. The house lived its own life, in which the mistress was just one of the characters. This feeling of being under surveillance created internal censorship. The woman learned to control her facial expressions even in her sleep. She was always on stage, even when the curtain seemed to be down. By the end of the 19th century, the atmosphere in these bedrooms was becoming increasingly stifling. The Gilded Age was coming to an end, and with it the old norms were disappearing, but the inertia was still strong. Women who had spent their entire lives in golden cages were growing old without ever knowing true freedom. Their beauty was fading, and with it, their purpose in the eyes of society. An aging socialite is a tragic figure. She could no longer shine at balls. Her children had grown up and become strangers. Her husband had often already passed away or grown completely cold. The bedroom was transformed from a boudoir into an infirmary and a refuge. Mirrors, once allies, were covered with cloth so as not to remind her of her lost youth. Things accumulated in the rooms. Souvenirs from trips, photographs of deceased relatives, trinkets. The space was filled with memories crowding out the present. The woman lived in the past because the future frightened her, and the present was empty. The bedroom became a museum of a life that had failed. Illnesses, real and imagined, finally confined the woman to her bed. The smell of medicine became the main aroma in the room. Now there was no need to wear a corset, but the body, deformed by it over many years, continued to ache. It was the price she paid for the waste of her youth. Social visits became increasingly rare. Friends died, and the new generation had different interests. Young suffragettes fought for women's rights, but for the old guard, this was alien and incomprehensible. They remained hostages to the world they themselves had helped to build. We look at black and white photographs and see calm, dignified faces. But now we know what was hidden behind that calmness. It was a mask that had grown onto their faces, behind which hid a frightened and lonely girl. The Victorian bedroom is a monument to female endurance. It is a place where silence was louder than a scream, and understanding this makes us look differently at the luxury of past centuries. Perhaps the echo of that quiet despair still lives on in the creak of an old floorboard or the glint of an antique mirror, and our task is to hear it and understand it. We have walked through a series of rooms from the past, lifting the veil on the secrets of Victorian bedrooms. We have seen that behind the external glamour of gilding and the rustle of silk lay destinies full of restrictions, pain, and loneliness. These women paid a high price for the right to be symbols of their era, sacrificing their happiness, health, and freedom. Their stories are a reminder that a gilded cage is still a cage, even if it is lined with velvet. What other secrets of women's history do you think we should uncover? Write in the comments about the topics that interest you most, whether it's the fates of queens or ordinary women at turning points in history. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new journeys into the past, where we will search for the truth behind beautiful facades.